Today we're going to talk about sentence types. And we've already talked about dependent and independent clauses, so we're going to start putting those together to talk about different sentence types. The first sentence type is a simple sentence. This is a sentence that only contains one independent clause. A compound sentence is a sentence that contains two or more independent clauses that are joined together. Most of the time you'll see these joined with a coordinated conjunction, like one of the fanboys, first, and, nor, but, or, yet, so. Or it could also be joined with a semicolon. A complex sentence is a sentence that consists of one main independent clause and one or more subordinate or dependent clauses. And finally, we have a compound complex sentence. This is a sentence which has two or more independent clauses and one or more subordinate clauses. So let's take a look. For the following sentences, underline the independent clauses once and the dependent or subordinate clauses twice. Afterwards, identify each as a simple sentence or a compound sentence. So you'll write out each sentence, underline the different parts, and then mark the sentence as either a simple sentence or a compound sentence. Pause the video now. All right, let's see how you did. Look at the first sentence. The governor will address the committee and endorse the bill. This is one independent clause. What throws a lot of people off is this and. But if you look at what the and is doing, the governor will address two things. The committee, and it will endorse the bill. So it'll do two things. It'll address the committee and endorse the bill. That's just two different verbal clauses or phrases. It's still just one clause. It's one independent statement. So this is a simple sentence. Look at number 2. Hamilton and Washington wrote Washington's farewell speech. This is one independent clause. Even though it has the word and, it's just got a compound subject. Since it's one independent clause, this is a simple sentence. Look at number 3. The climbers reached the summit and they spent the afternoon there. Now we have two independent clauses. We have the climbers reached the summit. That could be a sentence of its own. They spent the afternoon there. That could be a sentence of its own. It's got a conjunction here. Would you put a comma here? Yes, a comma would go there because we have two independent clauses. This makes this a compound sentence. Number 4. Beavers help conserve the soil, so they should be protected. Beavers help conserve the soil is an independent clause, so they should be protected. It's another independent clause. Should there be a comma here? Yes. We have two independent clauses, so this is a compound sentence. All right, let's look at the next part. For the following sentences, underline the independent clauses once and the dependent or subordinate clauses twice. Afterwards, identify each as a complex sentence or a compound complex sentence. This time, instead of having a simple sentence or a compound sentence, you will have complex sentences or a compound complex sentence. Pause the video now, write the sentences down, identify the independent and the dependent clauses, and mark each as either a complex sentence or a compound complex sentence. So pause the video now. All right, let's see how you did. Look at number 1, simmer the pudding until it thickens. There are two clauses here. Which one could stand on its own? Simmer the pudding. That's a command. This, until it thickens, is a dependent clause. What makes it dependent? The subordinator until. So since you have an independent clause and a dependent clause, this is a complex sentence. All right, number 2. Spain and Portugal signed the Treaty of Tordesillas in 1494, which divided the New World between them. We have an independent clause, and then a dependent clause. Since you have an independent clause and a dependent clause, this is once again a complex sentence. Look at number 3. If you finish your paper by Thursday, we can go to the movies. This one can get a little tricky too. This is your independent clause. We can go to the movies. That could stand on its own. But this first part is a dependent clause. What makes it dependent? The subordinator if. Okay? Even though the dependent clause comes first, we still just have one independent clause and a dependent clause. This is still a complex sentence. All right, last one. The clown looked everywhere for his trumpet, but since it was in his back pocket, he couldn't find it. With this, we have 2 independent clauses. Did you see where they were? Here's the first one. But where's the second? It's right here. These 2 clauses could stand on their own. The clown looked everywhere for his trumpet. That could be a sentence. He couldn't find it. That could be a sentence. But this is a dependent clause since it was in his back pocket. What makes it dependent? The subordinator sense. Now this sentence actually has 2 commas missing in it. Can you figure out where the commas should go? All right, the first one comes right before this conjunction because it separates this full independent clause and this independent clause that's attached to the dependent clause. You need a comma here. And now in this pair of independent and dependent clauses, we have the dependent clause first, so we need a comma there as well. All right, let's move on. Now this gets a little bit more complex. For the following sentences, underline the independent clauses once and the dependent or subordinate clauses twice. Afterwards, identify each as either a simple sentence, a compound sentence, a complex sentence, or a compound complex sentence. So instead of only having 2 choices, now you have 4. Pause the video now, write out the sentences, identify the independent and dependent clauses, and mark each sentence as either a simple sentence, a compound sentence, a complex sentence, or a compound complex sentence. Pause the video now. All right, let's look at these. Look at number 1. The jet ski resorts upstate will lose money unless it snows soon. That's our independent clause. It could stand on its own. The second part is our dependent clause. It cannot stand on its own because we have a subordinator right here. Because we have an independent and a dependent clause, this is a complex sentence. Look at number 2. Cockroaches feed on plant and animal remains, but they also come indoors in search of food or even wood. Now this one gets a little bit trickier because we have this conjunction and this conjunction and also this conjunction. But they're doing some different things. So cockroaches feed on plant and animal remains. This is just telling the different things that it's feeding on. It's not making a separate clause. Here, that they come inside searching for food or even wood. Those are just a short list of 2. But this, we would need a comma because this separates 2 independent clauses. So cockroaches feed on plant and animal remains. They also come indoors in search of food or even wood. Since we have 2 independent clauses, this is a compound sentence. Look at number 3. Number 3 is really difficult to read if you don't understand that one of these is a dependent clause. So we have, since the monkey house opened, attendance at the zoo has increased and peanut sales have skyrocketed. Now we've got a couple different things going on here. If you listened, you could hear the dependent clause. Since the monkey house opened. That's a dependent clause. Now we've got attendance at the zoo has increased. That's one thing it did. And peanut sales have skyrocketed. So let's look at this. Here we have a dependent clause attached to an independent clause. Since this dependent clause goes first, need a comma. And now we have the dependent clause, since the monkey house opened, attendance at the zoo has increased, and peanut sales have skyrocketed. Now we've got a conjunction in between the 2 independent clauses. We would need a comma there. So we have 2 independent clauses and 1 dependent clause. This is a compound complex sentence. Number 4, the saraband, a slow, graceful dance, originated in Spain. This one can be really tricky. I think it's easy for us to see that this, the saraband, attaches with this, originated in Spain. This part, however, a slow, graceful dance, just describes what the saraband is. It is not a complete sentence. We couldn't say a slow, graceful dance, and people understand what that means. So that is also part of the same independent clause. We only have 1 independent clause here, so this is a simple sentence. And the last one. Before he reached the age of 25, John Updike had published many articles. Moreover, he had also written a novel. There's a dependent clause here. Can you figure out what the dependent clause is? Right here. That's the dependent clause, before he reached the age of 25. Right. Now we have the independent clause. John Updike had published many articles. And then we have this semicolon. That makes this another independent clause. So we've got 2 independent clauses and a dependent clause. This makes this a compound complex sentence. How'd you do? Do you understand what's happening with these sentences? If not, you might need some extra practice. Come see me and let me know how you're doing. All right, once you feel comfortable with all this information, I want you to, there's a quiz on Canvas that covers sentence types, only sentence types. You will not have to diagram any of these sentences. It's 10 multiple choice questions. You have, this shouldn't say 3, this should say 2. 2 attempts. So the first one, if you don't score what you want, you can take it again. You do have to go through your lockdown browser, and I would like for you to do these in class sometime this week. Please complete these by September 21st at 3 o'clock. Okay. If you need help, come see me. Ask me during class. We have time to have these discussions, or come during Flex, and we can talk about these. Thanks, and have a great day.